All right, let's jump right into this. Today, we're going to break down a really specific and, honestly, pretty provocative spiritual philosophy. It's called the 33B solution, and it pitches this idea of a new world order, but not as a political thing. No, this is framed as a spiritual prophecy.
And right out of the gate, the source material hits you with its most controversial point. This is the hook for the entire philosophy. The argument here is that what you might just see as a strange social dynamic is actually way, way deeper. It's a sign of a massive struggle for spiritual survival in a world that's falling apart.
So, to really get the solution, you've got to understand the problem as it's presented. And the core diagnosis is simple. The world is fundamentally off balance. Society as we know it, it's in a state of total collapse, both spiritually and structurally.
Now, here's the interesting part. The whole idea is that this isn't some abstract theory you read in a book. The argument is that this imbalance is something you can already feel. You see it all around you. Broken families, men who seem confused, women who are just completely exhausted, and kids who feel lost.
And this philosophy breaks that feeling down into some very specific symptoms. It points to what it calls the collapse of masculinity, which leads to a collapse of leadership, and then, of course, a collapse of order. It also talks about a rise in spiritual warfare and this growing number of men who are disconnected from God. This, it claims, leaves women with a kind of independence that isn't spiritually grounded.
And this quote right here is the core metaphor used to explain the relationship between men and women. In this view, society has gotten so confused that it's caused a reversal of what they see as natural roles. The rib, which is supposed to symbolize the woman, is now trying to be the skull or the head, and that throws the whole system off balance.
So where does all this lead? Well, according to the source, the end result is a world without unity. It's a world where men don't protect women because they feel like they're hated, and women don't trust men because they've been taught that men are the problem. You can see how that would create a society just ready to fall apart.
Okay, so if the world is broken, who broke it? This worldview doesn't think it's just chance or social evolution. Nope, it points to a very deliberate, hidden plan put in motion by a spiritual enemy, which is sometimes called the enemy or the serpent.
And the strategy? It's a classic divide and conquer. The enemy whispers these conflicting, angry messages into everyone's ears. Women are told that divine order is just oppression, that submission is weakness. And at the same time, men are told, hey, she doesn't respect you anyway, so why bother? Don't protect her, don't even try to lead.
This whole thing builds into what's described as a three-sided attack. First up is the physical. The message, you don't need a man, removes the protector from the home. Then comes the mental. The message, you don't need order, makes God's structure seem like a prison. And then, the final, deadliest blow is spiritual, convincing people they don't need God at all, just cutting them off from their source.
And get this is the crucial point. The enemy's victory, according to this philosophy, doesn't come from being stronger. It comes from creating so much division and disconnection that humanity just becomes too weak to even fight back.
Okay, so we've laid out the problem and the bad guy. Now, let's get to the solution. It's called the 33B restoration, and it's a specific blueprint designed for men to rebuild not just their own lives, but the world around them.
So what are the 33Bs exactly? Well, they're not trends or slang. The source material is very clear about that. They are spiritual disciplines, but they're disguised as a lifestyle. Think of them as daily, non-negotiable habits that a man has to drill into his spirit over and over again until they become second nature. And this, right here, is the engine that drives the whole solution. The man's journey of rebuilding himself isn't for fame or money or even to get a woman. It's to get right with God. And the principle is that when a man aligns with God, everything and everyone connected to him gets lifted up too.
So here's the blueprint for what's called divine order. It's a really clear chain of command, right? It starts with God at the top. The connection flows through the man, then to the woman, which then shapes the home, which raises the children, and that ultimately creates a legacy.
So if a guy actually walks this path, what happens? Well, the philosophy promises some really tangible results. He gets stronger on the inside, his emotions level out, and his decision-making gets crystal clear. Because he's spiritually aligned, he starts to hear instruction instead of just noise and confusion. And one of the key outcomes is that he will naturally attract the right kind of woman, not by chasing her, but through the spiritual frequency he's now on.
But you gotta understand, this is not just about one guy getting his life together. The endgame is so much bigger than that. The vision here is to spark a massive cultural shift, to restore all of society, by starting with restoring the family, one family at a time.
So let's go back to that rib metaphor, because the role it describes is very specific. In this perfect order, the woman isn't seen as being below the man or above him. She is positioned right beside him, and her purpose is to serve as his balance. She's a crucial part of what keeps the whole system stable.
And this is the picture of the ideal outcome. When you have a strong man with discernment from his connection to God, and you pair him with a balanced woman who has found her purpose, what do you get? A home that raises healed children instead of wounded ones.
So how does one family doing this change the world? Well, it's all about the ripple effect. First, a few restored families become powerful examples for everyone else. Then those examples start to have real influence. That influence eventually grows and becomes a new culture. And that new culture leads to what's called a generational correction, basically a complete U-turn from the collapse we're supposedly in now.
And that brings us right back to where we started, to that initial prophecy. Now that we have all this context about a restored world, this quote takes on a whole new meaning. It's suggesting that the households of these spiritually aligned warrior men, well, they might have to get a little bigger. Not because of lust, but because of purpose.
And here's where it all clicks into place. This worldview predicts a future where men who are truly connected to God become so rare, so valuable, that women will naturally be drawn to them, for protection, for order, for survival. The attraction is completely reframed. It's not about sex. It's a kind of spiritual recognition. It's one soul recognizing a source of divine order in a world of pure chaos.
So there you have it. A complete blueprint that promises a return to order in a world that feels increasingly chaotic. It offers structure, it offers purpose, and a path back. But it leaves us with one heck of a question. To get that order, what is the cost of reversing the